Hey, everybody, and welcome back to that 90s pod. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about a song that, just absolutely dominated the late 90s.
Okay.
Natalie Imbruglia Torn.
Oh, yeah. Torn.
You know the one, right? I mean, come on. You probably slow danced to it at least once back in the day, maybe with someone you wish you hadn't.
Maybe.
Oh, the memories, haha. But seriously, this song, it wasn't just a hit. It was, a whole mood.
Yeah.
It captured this feeling of uncertainty and longing that I think a lot of people were feeling at the end of the millennium,
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the soundtrack to the end of a decade.
Totally. And if you're loving this trip back to the 90s, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your friends who, love all things 90s.
Yeah. Spread the 90s love.
Spread the 90s love, exactly. But okay, before we get totally lost in the feels of Torn, let's rewind a bit,
Yeah.
set the scene.
Okay. Rewinding.
What was the music scene like back then? What else was going on?
Well, in the late 90s, it was this really interesting mix of, I guess, post-recession anxiety. Remember we had that recession in the early 90s? And I think a lot of that uncertainty kind of lingered.
Yeah.
And then you also had this surge of really powerful female artists.
Well, yeah.
Think Alanis Morissette, Fiona Apple women who were not afraid to be raw and vulnerable in their music.
It was like a wave of honesty, just washing over the airwaves. And Natalie Imbruglia, she stepped right into that wave.
Exactly. And what's kind of cool is that she actually started her career as an actress.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
She was on an Australian soap opera.
Wow. Okay, so she went from the screen to the top of the charts. That's pretty wild.
It is. It's pretty amazing. And here's another interesting thing. Natalie wasn't actually the first person to record Torn.
Hold on. There's another version of Torn out there.
There is.
I'm learning so much today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, lay it on me. Who else sang it?
An American band called Edna Swap actually recorded it first.
Edna Swap, okay.
Yeah, and their version's good, but it was Natalie's version that really resonated with audiences globally.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some songs just hit differently depending on who's singing them,
Totally.
Okay, so we've got the historical context, we've got some behind the scenes trivia. But what made Torn such a phenomenon? Why did it become the anthem for a whole generation?
Well, when you really listen to the lyrics, it's more than just a typical breakup song, It's
Yep.
That feeling of being completely torn apart, like the ground has shifted beneath you. And I think a lot of people could relate to that.
Yeah, you're right. There's that one line, I'm all out of faith. This is how I feel. It's almost like a declaration of vulnerability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that resonated with so many people in the 90s, and I bet it still resonates with people today.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's the music video, that stark simplicity. It's just Natalie in this empty room, singing your heart out. It's so powerful.
Yeah, and it's she's inviting you into her emotional world,
And you're bringing back so many memories for me. I remember watching that video on MTV all the time.
Oh, yeah, MTV.
It was just so relatable. It wasn't flashy or overproduced or anything. It was just raw emotion.
And that rawness, that's what made it connect so deeply with people.
Yeah.
It just acknowledged that feeling of being lost and confused, which, let's face it, we all experience at some point, right?
Totally.
And Torn gave a voice to those feelings.
Okay, so we've talked about the lyrics, we've talked about the video, but the music itself, it's just so catchy and memorable.
Mm.
Was there anything unique about the composition or the production that contributed to its success?
That's a great point. One thing that stands out is the song's structure. It doesn't follow a typical verse chorus verse format. It's more like a series of interwoven sections, each one building on the last emotionally.
Now that you mention it, that's probably why it feels so different from other pop songs of that era.
Right.
It's not just repeating the same hook over and over. It's telling a story.
Exactly. And the production is really interesting too. They used a lot of acoustic guitars and layered harmonies, which gives it this warm, organic feel.
Okay.
So it's both intimate and anthemic at the same time.
So it's Torn kind of broke the mold in a few ways, lyrically and musically.
Yeah.
It wasn't just another generic pop song.
And I think that's like what's so fascinating about it.
Yeah.
If it managed to be commercially successful while also pushing boundaries, it was like a bridge between the grunge angst of the early 90s
Yeah.
and the more introspective pop music that emerged in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Like Torn paved the way for a whole new wave of artists who like weren't afraid to be vulnerable and authentic in their music.
Absolutely. And you can like hear echoes of Torn in the work of like so many artists who came after Natalie Imbruglia.
Okay, before we get to those artists, just a quick reminder to subscribe to that 90s pod
Uh-huh.
and, tell your friends about us. We love sharing these deep dives with you. But now back to Torn and like its influence on the music scene. What artists or bands come to mind when you think about its legacy?
Oh, well, I mean, like, when I think about artists who are, influenced by Torn, Taylor Swift immediately comes to mind, especially her early work. It was all about, like, raw emotion, and personal
Oh,
storytelling.
totally. Yeah, songs like Teardrops on My Guitar and You Belong With Me. Those have that same kind of confessional quality that Torn does.
Exactly. It's like that willingness to be vulnerable, right, and share those deeply personal experiences. That's, like, what connects them. And then you've got Halsey,
Yeah.
whose music is all about like embracing every part of yourself, even the messy parts.
Right.
She doesn't shy away from those complex emotions. And I think like Torn really helped create a space for that kind of honesty.
It's interesting to think about how, like, one song can have such a ripple effect,
Yeah.
influencing, like, not just one generation of artists, but, like, continuing to inspire, like, new voices today. It, like, speaks to the power of authenticity, I guess.
Absolutely. And that influence goes beyond like individual artists. Torn actually helped to shape entire genres of music.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this, like, genre evolution.
Okay. So think about like the rise of indie pop in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Bands like Death Cab for Cutie, The Shins, and Belle and
Oh,
Sebastian.
yeah?
They were all about creating music that was like deeply personal and emotionally resonant. They weren't afraid to be introspective and like explore those darker, more complex emotions.
Yeah, they definitely, like, tapped into that same vein of vulnerability that Torn did. It's like they took that raw honesty and, like, infused it with their own unique sound.
Exactly. And then you have the resurgence of acoustic music around the same time. Artists like Damien Rice, Ray LaMontagne, Iron and Wine,
Yeah.
they like stripped everything back to the bare essentials,
Yeah.
just a voice and a guitar, and they created music that was like incredibly powerful in its simplicity.
It's amazing how Torn, like, seemed to anticipate these trends. Like, it was like a signpost pointing towards this new era of music that, like, valued authenticity and emotional connection above all else.
It really was like a pivotal moment in music history. Torn helped to legitimize vulnerability as like a source of strength in songwriting.
So we've talked about the historical context, the lyrical and musical elements, and the, like, far-reaching influence of Torn. But before we wrap up, I'm curious. What do you think is, like, the biggest takeaway from this deep dive? What's the one thing you hope our listeners remember about Torn?
I think for me, it's that reminder that it's okay to be vulnerable, to embrace those raw emotions that make us human. And Torn showed us that those feelings can be a source of strength, not weakness.
Yeah.
And when we share those feelings, through art, whether it's music or something else, we can connect with others on a deeper level. I think that's really what it's all about, right?
Totally. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think, it's also a reminder that great music, it can transcend time,
Oh, yeah.
Like Torn was released over 25 years ago,
Hmm.
but it still resonates with people today because it taps into those, like, universal human experiences, like
Mm.
heartbreak and longing and searching for connection. We all go through that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's a classic,
Yeah.
It's proof that a song can be both commercially successful and artistically groundbreaking.
It really is. So I think we've pretty much covered all the bases here, from
Yeah.
historical context to the emotional impact to the musical legacy of Torn. It's
Yeah.
been quite a journey.
It has. It's always fun to like dive deep into a song that has had such a profound impact, on music and culture and just like on people's lives. I mean, I know it has for me.
Yeah, for sure. And a huge thanks to all of our amazing listeners for joining us on this nostalgic trip back to the 90s.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Torn.
And if you did, be sure to subscribe to that 90s pod and share it with your friends who, love all things 90s.
Yeah, spread the 90s love.
Spread the 90s love, exactly. And, be sure to check out our other episodes where we, explore more iconic songs and movies and moments from that unforgettable decade.
Yes. All right, well, until next time, keep those 90s vibes alive.
Yeah, keep them alive.